Welcome to our class in MIL or Media and Information Literacy. So I am your teacher, Mrs. Catherine R. Hernandez. For today, we are going to talk about Module 1 entitled The Influence of Media and Information to Communication. Before we start our lesson, let me read the learning objectives. So at the end of the session, you are expected to study communication as a process and how it is influenced by media and information. And second one, create a log that reflects your current use and interaction with media and information and the effects and influence of these in communication. Let us start our discussion by giving the meaning of communication. According to Skills Unit of 2020, communication is the act or process of transferring information from one place, person, or group to another. Sa communication, nangyayari ang pagbibigay ng information ng isang tao to your intended audience o kung kanino ipapadala ang mensahe. Another, it is the process of sending and receiving messages through verbal and or non-verbal means and receiving messages. Communication is a process of exchanging messages or information through speaking, writing, or graphical representation like signs, signals, and behavior. We have here two types of communication, and those are the verbal and non-verbal communication. So let's begin with the verbal communication. It refers to the form of communication in which message is transmitted verbally. Communication is done by word of mouth and piece of writing. Verbal communication is divided into two. Those are oral and written communication. In oral communication, gumagamit tayo ng spoken words kung saan ito ay face-to-face conversation, speech, telephonic conversation, through video, radio, television, voice-over, internet. Wherein communication is influenced by pitch, volume, speed, and clarity of speaking. Sa tone of voice, dito natin nalalaman kung galit ba yung kausap natin, if mataas o malakas ang boses niya, or kinakabahan, natutuwa, o kaya naman ay nahihiya. So while in written communication, written signs or symbols are used to communicate. It may be printed or handwritten. And message can be transmitted by email, letter, report, memo, and etc. Kung sa oral communication, nalalaman natin sa tone of voice ang feelings ng nagsasalita. In written communication, it is influenced by writing style, if it is formal or informal, vocabulary, and through grammar use. Also with precision and clarity of the language use. Another type of communication is the non-verbal communication. It is the sending or receiving of wordless messages. So in this type of communication, we use body language to deliver the message, which is a wordless message. We can only use our gestures, posture, or facial expression. One best example of nonverbal communication is the sign language. Now that we already know the types of communication, we are down to the communication process. We have here the diagram of communication process. So this diagram shows the process on how communication occurs. The communication process has 5 major elements: the sender, the receiver, the message, the channel, and the feedback. So let us define it one by one. First is the source. It is also called as communicator or the sender. Sender imagines, creates, and sends the message. So this process of turning thoughts into communication is called encoding. The communication process begins with the source or the sender. The sender has some kind of information, a command, a request, or an idea that he or she wants to present to others. Next in line is the message. The message is the stimulus or meaning produced by the source for the receiver or audience. In communication studies, a message is defined as information conveyed by words, and it is also the content of the communication process. Third in the list is the channel. The channel is the way in which a message or messages travel between source and receiver. Communication channels can be categorized into three principal channels. We have verbal, written, and non-verbal. So in verbal channel, the source or the sender uses words to code the information and speaks to the receiver. Next, in written, these are textual communication. The sender writes a message that the receiver can read it anytime, unlike conversation that transpire in real time. And last, in non-verbal channel, the source sends the information through body language, facial expression, and posture. So each of these communication channels have different strengths and weaknesses, and oftentimes we can use more than one channel at the same time. Fourth one is the receiver. The receiver receives the message from the source, analyzing and interpreting the message in ways both intended and unintended by the source. In order to receive a message, she or he listens, sees, touches, smells, and or tastes to receive a message. The process of turning communication into thoughts is called decoding. In the communication process, the receiver is the listener, reader, or observer to whom a message is directed. The receiver is also called the audience, decoder, or the interpreter. Fifth is the feedback. When the receiver responds to the source, intentionally or unintentionally, he or she is giving feedback. Feedback is composed of messages the receiver sends back to the source. Feedback refers to the response or reaction of receiver to the sender's message. Six is the environment. The environment is the atmosphere, physical and psychological, where an individual sends and receives messages. The environment can also include factors like formal dress that may indicate whether a discussion is open and caring or more professional and formal. Next is the context. The context of the communication interaction involves the setting, scene, and expectations of the individuals involved. A professional communication context may involve business suits that directly or indirectly influence expectations of language and behavior among the participants. Context refers to the setting in which communication takes place. The context helps establish meaning and can influence what is said and how it is said. Last in the communication process is the interference or noise. This is anything that blocks or changes the source intended meaning of the message. Examples are car horns, billboards, or perhaps the radio in your car interrupted your thoughts or your conversation with a passenger. Psychological noise is what happens when your thoughts occupy your attention while you are hearing or reading a message. So noise essentially is anything that distorts a message by interfering with the communication process. Noise essentially is anything that distorts a message by interfering with the communication process. Example ay, you're having a conversation with your friend and radio is playing in the background, or another person is trying to enter your conversation, or any distractions that prevent you from paying attention. And those are the different elements of communication process. Again, we have the sender or the source, message. We also have channel. Fourth is the receiver, feedback, environment, context, and last is the interference or noise. So next one is the influence of media and information to communication. Media and information technology play a vital role in globalization. Alam naman natin na yan, na ang media and information ay malaking tulong sa ating globalization, sa ating mundo. Through this, we become connected to different people around the world. These have a significant influence in the modern culture and become tools in sharing information, ideas, personal messages, and other content, and have become more widespread and accessible. Not only that, they become sources of information, but entertainment as well. But despite of having different advantages of media and information technology, mayroon din tayo mga threats or disadvantage ng mga ito. So let's start with the first threat. First threat of media to users is that media becomes a source of misinformation and fake news. So these sometimes are utilized to push personal gain and agenda, making the receiver of the information deceive, confuse, and misinformed. Nowadays, mahirap nang malaman kung totoo ba o hindi yung mga posts or news na nababasa natin, most especially in social media. Second is media is being abused by many. Though media helps us improve the way we communicate, it is also abused by many. So everybody publishes whatever they want and unmindful of the consequences of their posts. People misuse social networks, and once you post, you lose control of what happens to it. Kaya nga mayroong lumabas na awareness campaign, which is the think before you click, kung saan it is designed to guide users, bata man o matanda, against the risk they may encounter on digital and social media platforms. It is a strong message of an internet safety to protect us from overexposing on social media networking sites. Sabi nga, ang lahat ng sobra ay nakakasama. So that is why we need to use media moderately. For our last threat, so media pose medical, social, and psychological issues. What is posted on media may cause dissatisfaction with body image, creates addiction, promote identity stealing, and can destroy interpersonal relationships. Early research says that media negatively affects people's perception of their body image, lalong-lalo na sa mga kabataan, dahil kung minsan ay ikino-compare natin yung sarili natin sa images na nakikita natin sa Facebook, TikTok, or any social media networks. At kung ano yung trending, kahit hindi naman natin ito gusto, ay napipilitan na tayong gayahin para sumunod sa uso. And also, sabi nga, it creates addiction and promote identity stealing. And that ends our discussion for Module 1, the influence of media and information to communication.